The night was silent inside the Montana missile base. Rows of computers hummed, and red lights blinked across the control room. Young officers sat at their stations, checking screens, following strict routine. It was just another shift underground, far away from the world above. Captain Harris leaned back in his chair. He had worked here for years, watching over nuclear missiles that could destroy cities. But tonight felt different. A strange pressure filled the air, like a storm building without thunder. Then, without warning, the room shuddered. Every screen blinked once and went black. The humming stopped. A deep silence fell across the bunker. System failure? One officer shouted. Check the backup. Another yelled. But the backup power refused to start. One by one, the red lights on the missile launch board went dark. The weapons they guarded, the strongest machines of war, were suddenly useless. Above ground, guards patrolled near the silos. Private Reynolds lifted his flashlight, scanning the night sky. He froze. A glowing sphere hovered silently above the fields. Its light was white, but not like any human spotlight. It pulsed, slow and alive, as if the object was breathing. Sir, we have something in the sky. Reynolds whispered into his radio. Static answered him. The radios were dead. The guards watched in terror as more lights appeared. First 2, then 5, then 7 shining discs in the darkness, circling above the nuclear base like predators. They made no sound. They did not fire. But every time one pulsed, another silo below lost power. Back underground. Harris slammed his fist on the dead console. This is impossible. These systems cannot all fail at once. Lieutenant Marks pointed at the ceiling. His face was pale. Sir, this isn't a malfunction. Something is doing this to us. Harris wanted to deny it, but his heart was already racing. He had heard rumors, stories whispered in military bars. Strange lights seen over other bases. Instruments failing when they drew near. But those were just rumors. Until now, a siren wailed briefly, then died mid-scream as the last of the power drained. For the first time in history, the United States lost control of its nuclear arsenal without a single human touch. Get me command. Harris ordered. But the phone lines were as dead as the radios. Above, Reynolds felt his knees weaken. The largest light broke from the circle and descended lower, hanging directly above Silo 7. The ground shook as if something heavy pressed against it. The air became thick, buzzing in his ears. He wanted to run, but his legs would not move. His body was frozen by fear or by the light itself. He could only watch as the glow expanded, brighter and brighter, until the whole field shone like day. And then, just as suddenly, the light vanished. The sky returned to black. The hum stopped. Every disc was gone, but the damage was done. When the technicians finally restored emergency power, they found the truth. All 10 nuclear missiles were disabled, locked in permanent shutdown. No human engineer could explain why. Captain Harris stood in silence, staring at the dead launch board. His men looked at him for orders, but he had none. What could he say? That they had just been disarmed by something not of this earth. In the silence, Marks whispered the words that everyone else was too afraid to speak. They shut us down, like they wanted to show us how weak we are. No one argued. Hours later, Harris walked alone outside the base. The stars were cold above, but the ground still felt strange under his boots, as if it remembered the weight of something vast. He thought about the glowing discs, about their silent power, about the way they had come and gone as if human weapons meant nothing. And deep inside, he realized the most frightening truth. This was only the beginning. The official report said it was nothing, a technical malfunction. That was the phrase printed on every page of the investigation file about the Montana blackout. But Lieutenant Marks knew better. For weeks, he had not slept properly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the glowing discs above the silos, the blinding light swallowing the sky. He heard again the silence of the dead launch board, and the quiet terror in his captain's voice. The government might silence others, but Marks could not silence himself. One rainy evening, he walked into a small cafe on the edge of town. His uniform was gone. He wore plain clothes, but his eyes still carried the weight of secrets. At the corner table sat a woman with a leather notebook and a tape recorder. Her name was Julia Carter, an investigative journalist who had already lost jobs for chasing wild stories. Mark slid into the seat across from her. "You're Carter?" She nodded, studying his face. "You're late. You said you had something important." He looked around. The cafe was nearly empty, the only sound the clinking of cups. Marks leaned closer, his voice low. "They told us it was a malfunction, but it wasn't. We were shut down." Carter frowned. "Shut down? By who?" Marks pulled an envelope from his jacket. Inside was a single black and white photograph. Carter held it up under the dim light. Her breath caught dot. It showed a metallic disc floating above the silo fields, captured by one of the guards before his camera had burned out. The shape was sharp, smooth, nothing like a human craft. That night, Marks whispered, every missile died the moment these things appeared. Not damaged, not destroyed, disabled as if they flipped a switch. Carter's fingers trembled on the photo. "Do you know what you're saying? This would mean," Marks cut her off. "I know exactly what it means. And I know what will happen if they find me here. But the world deserves to know." For the first time, Carter saw fear in the soldier's eyes. It wasn't the fear of death. It was the fear of silence, the kind that eats away at a man who has seen something too big to carry alone. She pressed the record button. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Marks spoke. He described the humming in the air, the frozen bodies of the guards, the sudden blackouts. He told her how the Pentagon had ordered every file destroyed and every witness silenced. When he finished, Carter whispered, "Why come to me?" "Because you're the only one who listens," Marks said. He looked at the door, his hand tightening around his coffee cup. "And because time is short." At that moment, the cafe's lights flickered. A shadow moved outside the window. Carter turned her head quickly, but saw nothing, just the wet street glowing under a lonely lamp. Marks stood suddenly. His voice dropped to a sharp whisper. "They're here." Carter frowned. "Who? The Air Force?" But Marks wasn't looking at soldiers. He was staring at the window, at the dark sky above the street. For a second, Carter thought she saw it too, just a shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. A shape that shouldn't be there, bending the air. The cafe door opened. A man in a black coat walked in, tall and silent. His eyes swept the room. He ordered no coffee. He looked only at Marks. Marks leaned closer to Carter, his lips barely moving. "If I disappear, don't stop. Dig deeper. Other bases. Other nights. It's not just us. They've done this everywhere." Before Carter could ask what he meant, the man in black approached their table. His expression was calm. He spoke softly. "Lieutenant Marks, you need to come with me." Carter's heart raced. She looked at Marks, but his face was already pale with resignation. He knew this was coming. He slid the photograph across the table to her, his hand shaking. "Keep it safe." Then he stood and followed the stranger out into the rain. Carter sat frozen, the photo burning in her hand. She looked down at the silver disc, at the proof no one else was supposed to see. Outside, the rain fell harder, masking the sound of the black car door closing. Through the window, she caught one last glimpse of Marks's face before the car drove away. He looked calm now, almost relieved, but deep inside, Carter knew the truth. She might never see him again. Still, his words echoed in her mind. Other bases, other nights. And for the first time, she wondered, how many more blackouts had been hidden from the world? In Washington, the official story was already written. The Montana blackout, the strange lights, the frozen guards, every detail was buried under one phrase: system malfunction. The reports were edited, the photographs destroyed, and the witnesses forced into silence. Captain Harris and the surviving crew signed papers that night, swearing never to speak of what happened. The officers called it classified, but Harris knew the truth. It wasn't about national security. It was about fear of what the public might do if they learned that America's most powerful weapons could be turned off by something unknown. Meanwhile, Julia Carter sat alone in her small apartment. The photograph Marks had given her glowing faintly under the lamp. She turned it again and again, trying to convince herself it was real. She had checked the news, Nothing. No reports, no leaks, not even a whisper. It was as if the Montana base didn't exist. She wanted to write the story. But she also knew what had happened to Marks. She had no proof except the photo and the strange feeling that someone was already watching her. Far away, inside the Pentagon, meetings stretched into the night. Generals argued in low voices, scientists presented theories, and politicians demanded silence. "This never happened," one general growled. "If we admit our missiles can be switched off by some unknown force, the Soviets will think we're weak. But they have seen it too," another replied quietly. "We've had reports from their side as well. Their missiles were shut down the same way." The room went silent. No one wanted to admit the truth. The phenomenon was global. At the end of the table sat a young scientist named Dr. Evan Cole. He had been brought in to analyze the Montana incident, but most of his notes had already been seized. He sat quietly, watching the men argue, while his mind raced. He had seen the data. The missile systems hadn't failed. They had been commanded to shut down. But the command had not come from Earth. The interference had a pattern, a rhythm, almost like a signal. When the meeting ended, the generals ordered all files destroyed. Every witness was to be monitored, every scrap of evidence erased. But Dr. Cole couldn't let it go. That night, as the shredders roared and the incinerators burned, Cole slipped a small stack of papers into his briefcase. He copied the signal traces, the radar logs, the timestamps. He didn't know why, only that something inside told him this truth mattered too much to lose. Back in his apartment, Cole spread the documents across his desk. His eyes traced the strange waveforms recorded during the blackout. They weren't random. They pulsed like a heartbeat. He froze. His pen dropped from his hand. It looked like a code. If so, then whatever had shut down the weapons wasn't just a machine. It was intelligent. The thought chilled him, but also filled him with wonder. Was it a warning? A message? Or something far more dangerous? Across town, Julia Carter dug deeper. She searched old archives, military reports, even forgotten newspapers. To her shock, she began to find whispers of other blackouts. A British base in the 1970s, a Soviet silo in the 1980s. Always the same pattern, glowing lights. Sudden shutdown, silence from the officials. When she tried to request files, doors slammed in her face. Phone calls ended without answers. One night, her mailbox was torn open and the photo of the disc was missing. Someone wanted her to stop, but Julia wasn't ready to stop. She remembered Marks's voice, desperate and urgent, other bases. Other nights. Now she knew he had been telling the truth. Meanwhile, Dr. Cole worked in secret. Each night he compared the blackout signal against different languages, different codes, even radio broadcasts. The more he studied, the more convinced he became. This wasn't interference. This was communication. One evening, as he sat surrounded by papers and glowing monitors, his computer screen flickered. For a split second, the same strange waveform appeared across his desktop. Though he hadn't loaded any files, Cole leaned closer. His hands trembled. The signal wasn't just in his notes. It was here, now. His lamp flickered once, then steadied. He whispered to himself, "They're still watching us." He grabbed his pen and began scribbling furiously, afraid the message might vanish again. And as the lines of code filled the page, a single thought consumed him. What if they're not trying to destroy us? What if they're trying to warn us? The silence could not last forever. In the United States, the Montana blackout was buried under reports of technical errors, but thousands of miles away, another storm was already building. On a cold night in 1974, deep inside a Soviet missile base in Ukraine, Colonel Dmitry Ivanov sat at his console. The air was heavy with cigarette smoke, and his men worked quietly, checking their instruments. Then, just like in Montana, the impossible happened. The launch board went dark. "Comrade Colonel," an officer shouted, "we are losing power." Red lights blinked, then died. Every missile showed inactive. Panic spread through the bunker. Ivanov slammed his hand on the console. "Impossible. These systems are independent. They cannot all fail." But they had. Above ground, guards pointed to the sky with trembling hands. A giant orange sphere hovered silently, bathing the base in a glow like fire. Smaller lights darted around it, circling the silos. The soldiers raised their rifles, but when they tried to fire, the triggers locked as if frozen. The weapons no longer belonged to them. Within minutes, the lights vanished into the night. The missiles came back online, perfectly undamaged. As if nothing had happened at all. The next morning, Soviet leaders declared it enemy sabotage. But Ivanov knew no human enemy could do this. America was powerful, yes, but not this powerful. Half a world away, in England, a Royal Air Force radar operator watched his screen with wide eyes. His radar showed dozens of objects moving faster than any aircraft should. They stopped above a nuclear storage site in Suffolk, then every alarm in the base went silent. The guards outside described glowing orbs hovering low, shining with a soft white light. One man swore the lights pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. Minutes later, the orbs shot upward into the clouds and disappeared. When the engineers checked the missiles, they found the same mystery. The warheads had been temporarily disabled. No explosion, no damage. Just switched off. Soon, whispers spread across the world. In Canada, radar stations picked up fast-moving disks near their northern silos. In France, guards saw strange triangles above their bases. In China, entire control rooms went black during a test alert. The pattern was undeniable. Whoever or whatever was behind these events, they were not loyal to one nation. They did not care about borders, languages, or flags. They cared about the weapons. Back in Washington, Dr. Evan Cole pored over the reports Julia Carter had secretly mailed to him. They had never met in person, but her letters came without warning. Newspaper clippings, fragments of eyewitness testimony, old files she managed to steal before they vanished. Cole connected them to his own stolen data. The signal was the same in every case. Each blackout carried the same strange pattern of interference, the same pulse. One night, he called her from a payphone. "They are showing us something," he said, his voice urgent. Julia replied, "Then why doesn't anyone listen?" Cole hesitated. "Because the truth is worse than the lie. If the world knows our weapons can be turned off like toys, governments lose their power. They will bury this at any cost." Julia was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What if it's not a threat? What if they're protecting us from ourselves?" Cole didn't answer, but in his heart, he wondered the same. Meanwhile, in secret rooms from Washington to Moscow, another thought grew louder. What if it was a threat? If unknown craft could disarm the most dangerous weapons on Earth, what else could they do? Today they shut them down. Tomorrow, they might take control. The generals wanted answers. Some wanted war. Plans were drawn to capture the lights, to force them down, to fight back. But as they planned in the dark, the lights kept appearing, always above the silos, always shutting down the weapons, always leaving without harm. And then, for the first time, something different happened. In northern Norway, near a small NATO facility, the lights came again. But instead of simply disabling the missiles, one of the glowing orbs dropped lower. It hovered just above the frozen ground, shining bright against the snow. Soldiers approached, weapons raised. The orb pulsed 3 times, slow and steady, like a signal. Then it shot upward into the stars, leaving behind nothing but a circle burned into the ice. A message, but a message of warning or invitation? No one could agree. Julia Carter typed late into the night, her apartment filled with scattered notes. The photo of the Montana disc sat beside her typewriter. She tapped the keys, her headline unfinished, "The UFOs that control our weapons, warning or war?" Her hands paused. She stared at the paper, her mind racing, because deep down, she knew something that no general wanted to admit. If these beings could stop nuclear war at any moment, then maybe, just maybe, they already ruled the fate of humanity. The Pentagon called them malfunctions. The Soviets called them sabotage. But Julia Carter called them what they were: encounters. Her desk was buried under piles of notes, old reports, and letters she had exchanged with Dr. Evan Cole. Both of them were chasing the same ghost, piecing together fragments that governments wanted destroyed. And now, She had something new. It came in a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single reel of audio tape, marked with one line in red ink: Montana minus 1967, interference log. Julia stared at it for hours before daring to play it. When she finally did, her speakers filled with static, harsh, broken noise, like electricity caught in a storm. But buried inside the static was something else. A rhythm. She called Dr. Cole immediately. "You need to hear this." 2 nights later, Cole arrived at her apartment in secret. He looked exhausted, his eyes red from sleepless nights, but his mind was alive. Together, they set up the tape on her old player. The static filled the room again. A storm trapped on magnetic ribbon. Cole leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Pause it. Play it slower." Julia adjusted the dial, dragging the sound down. The static shifted, becoming deeper, heavier. And then something new emerged, a pulse. It was faint, but steady, like a digital heartbeat. Cole scribbled notes furiously, counting the intervals. "This isn't random interference. It's structured. Someone or something wanted us to hear this," Julia whispered. "It almost sounds like..." She hesitated, afraid of her own words. Like a voice, Cole's hand froze over his notes. He stared at the machine, then nodded. "Yes, modulated, patterns repeating. Like speech but in a language we don't know." The room was silent except for the ghostly pulse of the recording. That night, they worked side by side, replaying the tape at different speeds, running it through filters. Slowly, a shape began to form in the noise. Not words they could understand, but sounds with rhythm, intention, design. Julia leaned back, her skin crawling. Why would they leave this? Cole's answer was quiet. "Because it's not about destruction. It's about communication. Every time they shut down a base, they send the same signal. They're not just disabling weapons, they're sending a message." Julia stared at him. "Then what's the message?" Cole didn't reply. He COULDN single quotes D. Meanwhile, deep in another hidden office, military leaders debated the same question. Generals slammed their fists on tables, demanding action. Some wanted to fire missiles at the lights. Others warned that an attack could trigger something far worse. "They are testing us." One general insisted. "Next time, they won't stop at our weapons." But another man, older and quieter, whispered, "Or maybe they are saving us from ourselves." No agreement was reached. The official orders remained the same: deny, cover, erase. Back in Julia's apartment, the hours stretched into morning. Cole's desk was littered with coffee cups and scribbled charts. Finally, he pointed to a section of the recording he had looped again and again. "Listen here," he said. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses again. "It repeats." Julia listened, her heart pounding. "What does it mean?" Cole tapped his pen. "I think it's an intentional marker, like someone knocking on a door." Julia felt a chill. "Then they're waiting for us to answer." The next day, Julia tried to contact a former Air Force operator who had monitored the Montana blackout. She found his name in an old directory, but when she called, a cold voice answered, "This number is no longer in service." Later that night, her phone rang. When she answered, silence filled the line. Then, faintly, the same 3 pulses she had heard on the tape. She dropped the receiver, her blood running cold. Across town, Cole experienced the same. His radio, switched off, suddenly crackled to life. Static hissed, and then the 3 pulses came again, clear and deliberate. The message was no longer buried in old tapes. It was here. Now. Julia and Cole met again, shaken but determined. Julia's voice trembled as she spoke. "They know we're listening. They want us to listen." Cole nodded slowly, his face pale. "Then maybe we're already part of their experiment." Julia leaned closer, lowering her voice. "What if this isn't just about stopping nuclear war? What if it's about control? About proving that they can reach us any time they want?" Cole looked down at his notes. The 3 pulses stared back at him, written in black ink like a warning. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Then the question isn't why they shut us down." He looked at her with haunted eyes. "The real question is what happens when they decide not to turn us back on?" The plan had no name. It didn't appear on any official orders. and no one outside a tight circle of generals even knew it existed. But inside a dark hangar at a hidden Air Force site in Nevada, the men preparing for it called it the net. Colonel Briggs stood at the center of the room, a tall man with hard eyes. For weeks, he had been quietly pulling resources from different bases, assembling a secret team. His belief was simple: if the lights could shut down their weapons, then those lights were the enemy. He looked at his men, pilots, engineers, and special forces, all handpicked. "They think we're weak," Briggs said. "They think they can come and go as they please. Tonight we show them we're not afraid." No one spoke. The plan sounded bold, but in their hearts, they were afraid. Every man there had seen footage of the glowing disc, silent, impossible, untouchable. Still, orders were orders. Julia Carter had heard whispers of something big through one of her contacts. Her hands trembled as she typed notes into her battered laptop. She had no exact details, only a warning from a nervous voice on the phone: "They're going to strike first. Tell your friend. Tell Cole. If they do this, we all pay." Julia called Cole immediately. His voice was sharp with panic. "They're going to attack them?" "That's what I'm hearing," she said. "A trap, something about a net. They think they can hold one down." Cole's face was pale on the grainy video call. "Do they even understand what they're dealing with? If these things can control our weapons, what do they think will happen if we try to fight?" Julia didn't answer. She already knew. That night, the trap was set above a remote stretch of desert. A decoy missile silo was prepared, its warheads removed but its systems active. High-powered jamming towers ringed the area, disguised as radar dishes. And above it all, the Air Force's newest aircraft waited, silent in the sky. Briggs watched from a mobile command center, headphones pressed to his ears. His men whispered updates. Unknowns detected on radar. Multiple contacts inbound. Briggs's heart pounded. Hold positions. Wait for them to move closer. And then, the sky lit up. 5 glowing discs appeared without sound, sliding through the darkness like living metal. They moved above the decoy silo, pulsing softly. "Begin the net," Briggs ordered, on the ground. The jamming towers activated, filling the air with a scream of invisible energy. Above, the aircraft launched a lattice of electromagnetic traps, bright, crisscrossing beams designed to interfere with the UFO's movement. For a moment, it seemed to work. The discs slowed. One flickered. Cheers rose in the command center. But then, everything changed. The lights brightened. The ground shook. Instruments failed one by one. Screens went black. Radios died mid-sentence. Even the jamming towers flickered and fell silent. Briggs shouted, "Keep the net up. Increase power." His technician's voice cracked. "Sir, they're shutting us down." Above the desert, the 5 discs moved together, forming a perfect circle. A low hum rolled across the ground, so deep it rattled teeth. The soldiers near the towers dropped to their knees, unable to move. Julia watched from miles away, standing on a hill with binoculars. She had followed a lead, risking everything to see this with her own eyes. Now she saw the net collapsing, the lights above growing brighter, as if angry. She whispered into her phone, though Cole couldn't hear her through the dead line. "They're not machines. They're warning us." In the command center, sparks rained from the ceiling as every system failed. Briggs gripped the edge of the table, staring at the glowing circle in the sky. And then, something new happened. A 6th light appeared, larger than the others, deeper in color. Pulsing slowly, it descended until it hung just above the decoy silo. The hum became a vibration in every chest, a force you could feel more than hear. The soldiers on the ground reported the same thing through dead radios. "We can't move. We can't breathe. It's like we're being held." Briggs whispered to no one in particular, "God help us." The 6th light pulsed 3 times. Pause. 3 times again. The same signal Cole had found on the tape. Then, with a flash brighter than daylight, every disc vanished. The hum stopped. The systems came back online. The net was gone, burned out. The soldiers staggered to their feet, dazed. Julia dropped her binoculars. Her heart hammered in her chest. They hadn't destroyed the base. They hadn't attacked. They had simply shut everything down, again, and then left. But this time, the ground told a different story. Where the 6th light had hovered, The sand was scorched into a perfect circle 20 meters wide, smooth as glass. In the center was a single mark burned deep into the earth. Julia climbed down the hill, running toward it. When she reached the edge of the circle, she saw it clearly. 3 lines, pause, 3 lines again. The signal dot back in his apartment. Cole listened to Julia's frantic voice over the phone. "They send us a warning," she said. "A real one, not just on the tape. On the ground. They're telling us to stop." Cole's hand shook as he held the receiver. He could hear the terror and wonder in her voice. "They know everything," she whispered. "Our weapons, our plans, our trap. They're always one step ahead." Cole closed his eyes. The truth was undeniable now. "They're not just watching us," he said softly. "They're teaching us." The world had seen many strange nights, but no one was prepared for this one. It began at midnight, across the planet America, Russia, China, India, Europe. Every nuclear missile base went dark at the same time. Warning lights flashed, alarms blared, but control panels showed the same impossible message: disabled. Generals shouted into dead phones. Technicians slammed keyboards that no longer worked. Pilots scrambled to cockpits that refused to start. Entire defense systems had gone silent, as if the world's greatest weapons had been erased. At first, leaders thought it was a cyber attack, but then the reports came in, from Montana to Siberia, from deserts to oceans. People looked up and saw them, hundreds of glowing disks moving in the night sky. They appeared everywhere at once, silent, smooth, unstoppable, and above them all was something new. It was not a disk. It was enormous, larger than a city, shaped like a dark crescent that blotted out stars. Some called it a mothership. Others called it a shadow. It hung in the sky above the Pacific, so massive that satellites captured only parts of it at a time. On the ground, people stopped their cars in the middle of highways. Soldiers abandoned guard posts. Families came out of their houses. Everywhere, millions of eyes looked upward. Cole stood on the rooftop of his apartment building. Julia beside him, both frozen. He whispered, This is the final step." Julia gripped his arm. "They've shut down everything. They're making sure no one can fire back." The mothership pulsed once, and the air itself seemed to vibrate. Inside command centers across the world, the same signal appeared on screens that should have been dead. 3 lines, pause. 3 lines again, the warning. The same pattern Cole had heard on the old tape. The same message burned into the desert sand. But now, something new followed. The pattern changed. 3 lines became 4, then 5, then 6, expanding, growing. Cole's eyes widened. "It's not just a warning anymore. It's a message." Julia asked, "What does it mean?" Cole shook his head. "I don't know, but it's building, like they're counting up to something." Then the sky lit up. From the mothership's surface, a beam of pure light stretched downward, not destructive, but blindingly bright. It didn't strike any city. It didn't touch any base. Instead, it reached the middle of the ocean, carving a glowing column on the waves. The seas boiled for a moment, then calmed. Out of the water rose something no one had ever seen, a giant obelisk, black and shining, covered in patterns of light. The beam held it in place as it hovered above the waves. News cameras from across the world turned to it. Everyone saw it. Every channel, every live stream. Humanity was watching one event together. Cole's phone buzzed with static before clearing. Julia gasped. "It's them. They're coming through." On the screen, the signal turned into symbol shapes no one had ever seen, alive with movement, shifting like water. And then, slowly, they rearranged themselves into human letters. For words, "We control the fire." The world fell silent. Cole's chest felt tight. He whispered, "The weapons. The bombs. The fire of the atom. They're telling us it's not ours anymore." Julia's eyes filled with tears. "They've taken it from us." Panic spread in some places. Leaders demanded answers, tried to regain control. But no systems came back online. Every nuclear weapon remained locked, every missile useless. The fire of destruction was gone, and above, the mothership pulsed again. The disks across the skies formed patterns, lines, circles. spirals as if drawing across the stars themselves. People whispered that it looked like a message written across the heavens. Children pointed at the sky. The old fell to their knees. Soldiers lowered their guns. For the first time in history, the world understood something together. Julia held her camera high, recording everything. Her voice shook as she whispered for her broadcast. They are not here to destroy us. They are not here to conquer. They are here to stop us from destroying ourselves. Cole's eyes stayed on the obelisk above the ocean. But why now? Why after all these years? Julia shook her head. Maybe we were getting too close. Maybe one wrong move would have ended it all. And they couldn't let that happen. The beam of light snapped off. The obelisk slowly sank back into the ocean, leaving the waves glowing for a few moments before fading into black. The mothership lingered for a heartbeat longer. Then, with a pulse of light that rolled like thunder, it vanished along with every disk in the sky. The world was dark again, silent, except for the message that remained on every screen: remember. Cole and Julia stood together in the quiet night, listening to the city slowly wake from its fear. Somewhere far away, church bells rang. Somewhere else, people cheered. Others only cried. Cole finally spoke. They've ended the age of weapons. The question is, what comes next? Julia lowered her camera, tears in her eyes but a faint smile on her lips. Maybe the age of survival.